Story 1. This happened a few years ago when I was working on an airbase in the Middle East. All the expatriate workers lived in a compound about 30 kilometers from work, and the company provided a bus to take people between the airbase and the compound. Most of the people who had been there for a while eventually bought their own cars. It made things easier since you could go shopping off compound or, more importantly, leave early if you were let off work ahead of schedule, which happened fairly often. It wasn't unusual for those on the back shift to finish at 8 in the evening, but have to wait until after midnight for the bus to pick them up. By this point, I had been there for a few years myself and had bought my own car, a very basic Hyundai Accent with no optional extras at all. It didn't even have electric windows or central locking. Because of that, I almost never locked it. Anyway, we had one person working with us, who I'll call Dave, not his real name. He'd been around for years, but still refused to buy a car, always giving vague reasons for it. On top of that, he didn't like using the company bus either. Whenever it was time to leave work, Dave would tag along with people and ask for rides back to the compound. Normally, this wasn't a big deal. People helped each other out all the time. Cars occasionally broke down or had to go in for servicing, and it was good to return the favor when you could. But Dave was different. He was a one-way transaction. He never offered anything in return, not even a thank you. Fuel money wasn't the issue. Petrol was unbelievably cheap at the time, around 4.5 pence per liter. You could literally fill your tank with the spare change in your ashtray. I had my family living there with me, and that detail becomes important shortly. One day, I was running a little late finishing work. I had a complicated handover with the oncoming supervisor, and it took longer than usual. When I finally got to my car, I was stunned to see Dave already sitting in the passenger seat. Seriously. I opened the door and asked him what on earth he thought he was doing in my car. "I need a lift back to the compound," he said casually. Apparently, he had let himself into my unlocked car and decided to wait there without asking me if I was even going back to the compound. Everyone else had already gone home, and the day shift bus had left. There was just one slight problem. I wasn't going back to the compound. Back then, my daughter wasn't in school yet, and it wasn't one of her nursery days. She only went a couple of times a week. My wife and daughter had spent the day at a nearby mall that had a massive soft play area, and I was supposed to meet them there before we went out for dinner. I explained this to Dave and told him he needed to get out of my car. He frowned and asked, "What am I supposed to do then?" I calmly pointed out 3 things. I was going to meet my family for dinner. If he'd asked me earlier in the day for a lift, I would have told him I wasn't heading straight back to the compound. Dave then had the nerve to say that I should take him back to the compound first and then go meet my family. I told him very firmly that it wasn't happening and that it was his problem to figure out. In the end, he had to go back into work and wait until someone left around 8 that evening, about 5 hours later. Meanwhile, I had a wonderful time with my wife and daughter at the soft play area, and afterward, we enjoyed dinner at Nando's. After that day, Dave never climbed into anyone else's car without being invited again. Story 2. So, I'm getting really tired of those constant automated calls trying to scam the elderly. I've always enjoyed messing with scammers, like the time I wasted 20 minutes of one's time while driving to town. They truly thought they had me hooked on some made-up government payment card nonsense. But lately, I've been answering my significant other's phone instead and shutting them down as quickly as possible. Today, though, I got a call about end-of-life benefits, and since I was already in a mood, I decided to have some fun. The guy had a noticeable foreign accent, which somehow made things even funnier. I made it my mission to sound as confused, friendly, and out of touch with reality as possible, all while putting on the most exaggerated Southern accent I could muster. He starts his little sales pitch and asks for my name. I can barely hold back laughter as I say, "Yes, sir, it's diarrhea spelled D-I-apostrophe-A-R-R-H-E-A Jones spelled Jones." From that moment forward, he kept calling me diarrhea, pronouncing it exactly the way it sounds, which made the entire exchange absolutely hilarious. I could hardly keep from bursting out laughing. The name idea wasn't even mine. I'd once seen a video where someone used a similar fake name, Diarrhea Pants, and it stuck with me. I pretended to be confused about what year I was born, which wasn't exactly acting, it was just me doing terrible math. But it worked. The guy sounded thrilled to have such a confused customer. At one point, he told me I sounded closer to 25 than 65, which I wasn't sure was a compliment or an attempt to test me. Either way, I decided to make him uncomfortable by joking about things I would do if I were 25 again. That seemed to throw him off a bit, and I could tell he wanted to move on quickly. He kept repeating my name over and over as he continued his spiel. Things like, "Okay, Diarrhea, blah blah blah," or "Now Diarrhea, these benefits will help you." I almost lost it every single time he said it with that serious tone. Eventually, he got to the real goal, asking for bank information. I told him about my 401k, 2 checking accounts, 1 savings, and an internal revenue service account. I could practically hear him leaning in with excitement. As he started asking for my banking details, I decided it was time to end this performance with a bang. I pulled the phone away from my face, dropped the fake accent, and yelled, "Dad," in a completely different voice. Then I switched back to my southern drawl and said sweetly, "Excuse me, sir, hold on a second." That's when I staged an argument between Diarrhea, the elderly father, and his very frustrated adult son. As the son, I yelled that Dad shouldn't be on the phone and called him a fool for trusting strangers. Meanwhile, the scammer kept nervously asking, "Diarrhea, are you okay?" and "Diarrhea, what's happening?" To make it sound real, I smacked my arm loudly to mimic someone being hit and, as Diarrhea cried out in an exaggerated southern accent, "Please stop hitting me." Then, in a shaky voice, I told the scammer I had to go and hung up. Fast forward about 10 minutes. I was in the middle of telling my partner this whole story when her phone rang again. Same number. So I answered in the son's gruff voice this time. The scammer immediately asked for Diarrhea. Without missing a beat, I said, "Diarrhea had to run. He's not allowed to use the phone, and he's not doing too well." There was a long pause before the scammer asked, "Mentally or physically?" At that point, I realized the guy actually sounded concerned. Maybe I'd gone a little too far, but I wasn't stopping now. I told him Dad had dementia and that he should be ashamed of himself for trying to take advantage of an elderly man. He quickly responded, "No, sir, I wasn't trying to take advantage of anyone else." That else was all I needed. I pounced on it, scolding him and telling him to never call again. Then I hung up. So yeah, that was about 10 minutes of my afternoon well spent. Update nearly 2 weeks later. 12 days after posting and 13 days after the prank, the same guy started calling back. A few times, I answered as the son again, irritated, telling him to stop calling. When he didn't get the message, I got creative. The next time he called, I said in my gruff voice, "Dad's in timeout right now. He won't be answering the phone anytime soon. Even if he wanted to, I don't think his hands would let him." Then added a slow, mischievous chuckle for effect. Cheers. Story 3. This started a bit ago when I was at an online camp. My mom met the entitled mother from the camp, and her son, the entitled son, also went to my school. I am a 14 male, and he is a 12 male. My mom made me text him and ask if he plays any video games. My mom said that the entitled son was very shy and bad at making friends, but he was also apparently very smart and was bullied at school and by his brother. The kid told me he only plays Fortnite, so I decided to re-download it. We played for a bit, and I thought that was it. I am pretty shy and introverted, so I don't really like talking to people. But the entitled son wanted me to play Fortnite with him every night. That was taxing on my mental health. Remember, for the rest of the story, I am still playing Fortnite with him every night. He always wanted to do the same thing. 1 versus 1 with the same loadout every time. I always stomped him. This got very boring. I asked many times if we could do something else, and he would always say no. Only about 2 weeks after I met the kid, Halloween came. Even with my age, I really like Halloween. Sadly, they invited me over and my mom forced me to go. Keep in mind that I just met this kid 2 weeks ago and COVID is happening. They kept telling me that I can take my mask off, and they don't care, but I do. Now I quickly found out that the stuff at the beginning was all false. He wasn't smart. I don't mean to be rude, it was just obvious he had no common sense. My mom told me that the entitled mother said that the bully was a kid on the basketball team that very rudely told her son wasn't going to get in with that form and showed him how to do it. The worst thing was his brother, though. I could tell by his personality. He was never bullied. I have for my entire life, I know this well. I looked into it, and I think he was bullying his brother. I am not going over everything that happened, but just the important stuff from here on out. I went to their house one night, and the entitled mother asked me about my grades. This was very intrusive, and I didn't want to answer. I tried to avoid the question, but they kept pushing it. I have always gotten straight A's and B's my whole life, but this year was different. I won't go over all of it, but trust me. I told them about my bad grade, and they started making fun of me. Both the entitled mother and son. I called my parents to pick me up early. In the morning, my mom called, and the entitled mother showed my mom who she truly was. My mom told me what she said. Now, most entitled mothers would deny doing anything like this, but she was different. She said, and I am not kidding, "We are on a different level because we are Asian. That makes it fine." I had never met someone who thought they were better than me because of their race. This explained a lot about the entitled son. I decided to talk to him about this in the morning. Then I remember that he doesn't talk to me unless I play Fortnite. I told him it was important, but he really didn't care. So I waited until I could play Fortnite. We logged on, and this is when I confronted him. I didn't mention what his mom said because I think my mom wasn't supposed to tell me. But I didn't mention how rude and disrespectful he was to me. I told the entitled son that if he didn't learn to respect me and my time, I would cut contact. Since he was a crybaby, he went to his mom and literally cried. The entitled mother got mad at me and texted my mom all day. She called my mom at night and they talked. My mom said maybe we need a break from each other until Easter or something. They said okay, and I had the best month of my life. But the entitled son started texting me again. Apparently, they don't know the line, "We need to take a break." They took it literally. I was done, so from there on out, I started making excuses. My latest one was that I was sick. Yesterday, I was playing Fortnite with my debate partner, and he logged on. I completely forgot about him. After my debate partner left, I joined his party. His brother was in the party too, and he was the only one who noticed. He said my username, and the entitled son assumed he just wanted to talk smack about me. And not that I was in the party, and said, "He is so trash at the game and isn't worth my time." I said that was mean and I was going to leave, and he said wait, no. He invited me to his party, but I blocked him. I'm really glad I'm done with his nonsense. Story 4. I've been banking at the same branch for about 5 years now. It's one of those older buildings with a 24-hour ATM right by the main entrance and a drive-thru lane that runs alongside it. The setup is a bit odd. The entrance to the drive-thru is narrow, but once you're in, it opens up so cars can line up on the left to use the machine while others can squeeze through on the right to access the back street. People used to park there sometimes when they went inside the branch, which was technically against the rules. But nobody really made a fuss about it since it wasn't causing major problems. I worked evening shifts back then, so I usually did my banking later in the day when the inside was closed. On this particular evening, I needed to deposit a check before the cutoff time, so I drove over to use the drive-thru ATM. It was around 8 o'clock, still light out, and the parking lot was mostly empty. As I approached the drive-thru entrance, a silver sedan pulled in right before me. I felt a tiny flash of annoyance. I'd been hoping to get in and out quickly, but I reminded myself that she got there first, fair and square. I just have to wait my turn. No big deal. But then something strange happened. Instead of pulling forward to the ATM, she just stopped. Right there at the entrance. Her car was completely blocking the narrow opening, and I watched as she put it in park, opened her door, and stepped out. I sat there for a moment, confused. Was she having car trouble? But no, she was walking toward the sidewalk where the pedestrian ATM was located. She was just going to use that one instead, and she'd left her car blocking the entire entrance to the drive-thru. I could see her clearly. She'd definitely seen me behind her. There was no way she didn't know I was there waiting. She could have easily pulled forward and to the right, out of the way, but she just left her car sitting there like it was a parking space. I rolled down my window. "Me, you're blocking the way to the drive-thru. This isn't a parking space." She turned and looked right at me with this dismissive expression. "Karen, I know." Just like that. 2 words. She knew she was blocking me and didn't care. She turned back toward the ATM like our conversation was over. Something in me snapped. I'd had a long day, and this woman's attitude was too much. I leaned on my horn. Hard. The sound echoed off the building and filled the parking lot. She spun around, and I could see the anger on her face. She marched back toward me, and I thought maybe she was going to move her car after all. But instead, she bent down and pulled off one of her heels. Before I could process what was happening, she swung it at my car. The sharp heel smashed into my front light. Glass scattered across the pavement. She hit it again. "Karen, you want to honk at me? Huh?" I was in complete shock. I fumbled for my door handle and pushed the door open, trying to get out to stop her from destroying my car. But she was faster. She grabbed my door and slammed it shut right on my hand. Pain shot through my fingers and up my arm. I yelled and jerked my hand back inside. "Me, what is wrong with you?" She didn't answer. She just threw her heel toward her car and stormed back to it, getting in and slamming the door. I was cradling my hand, which was throbbing, watching her through tears of pain and rage. I expected her to speed off, but what happened next was almost unbelievable. She threw her car into reverse without looking, backed up too fast, then jerked it into drive. She was so angry and flustered that she wasn't paying attention. Her car lurched forward at an angle, and I heard the horrible crunch of metal and plastic as she drove straight into the pedestrian ATM. The machine tilted back against the wall. Her front bumper crumpled. The car stopped, and for a second, everything was silent. Then she tried to reverse again, but her car was stuck. The wheels spun uselessly. She got out, looked at the damage, and her face went pale. Without another word, she ran back to her car, managed to wrench it free, and started to drive away. But I already had my phone out. My hand was still aching, but I managed to dial with my other hand. "Operator, 911, what's your emergency?" "Me, I need to report an assault and a hit and run. A woman just attacked me and crashed into the bank's ATM machine." I gave them her license plate number, the make and model of her car, and a description of what happened. The operator told me to stay where I was and that officers were on their way. She didn't get far. The police caught up with her about 2 blocks away. When the officers came back to take my statement, they told me she'd tried to claim I'd been harassing her and that the damage to the ATM was an accident. But there were cameras. The bank had the whole thing on video, her blocking the entrance, attacking my car with her shoe, slamming the door on my hand, and crashing into the ATM. I pressed charges for assault and destruction of property. My hand was bruised badly, and I had to get it checked out at urgent care, but nothing was broken. The bank also pursued charges for the damage to their property. Weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that she'd been ordered to pay restitution and got a criminal record. My insurance covered my repairs, and they went after her for the costs. Story 5. This happened a few years ago. When I was 16, I got my first job working for a franchise-owned pizza place. I worked there until I was 24. When I was 19, I received the shift leader and got a .30 raise. Our store was pretty slow, and we only had a handful of employees there, so I understood. One day, the franchise owner comes in when I'm running my shift to tell me I would be getting a new manager. The franchise owner gave me his personal number and said if I needed anything, to call him if the new manager had any problems. So the next day, I'm working my 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. shift, and the new manager comes in. We'll call him Stan. We talk a little more, and he asks why there isn't an assistant manager. I let him know we probably don't make enough to pay an assistant manager. He said he would worry about that, and he left. I jumped to the conclusion that he was going to make me the assistant. Wrong. I closed that night and had to come in at 4 p.m. the next day. When I did, Stan was there with a girl I've never seen before wearing one of our uniforms. He said it was his roommate, Wendy. She had never worked for a pizza place before, but she just lost her job. He hired her as the assistant manager and completely changed my schedule and severely cut my hours. Oh, and guess who had to train her? Yep. Before Stan and Kelly, I worked 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. 4 days a week, then 4 to close on 2 other days. Now I just have 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. 5 days a week. No more overtime. That severely hurt me financially, but I sucked it up. This place was pretty much in my backyard, and I loved my job before all this mess. The next couple of weeks are okay, except we are coming up short every night that I close. Usually no more than $10, but that's a lot. And it was coming back on me because I'm the one who does the nightly inventory, paperwork, and deposits. I brought the shortage problem to Stan, and he told me if it kept happening, he would start taking it from my check. I had never stolen a penny from this place, and I felt pretty attacked. He says he wasn't accusing me, just letting me know what he would have to do. I said fine. Every day from now on, when I close, I want to do a shift change. A shift change is basically counting down the drawers, which would help figure out where the shortages are coming from. He agrees. The very next day I go in at 4 and start clocking in and all that fun stuff before Wendy leaves. I look at the order screen for the day to see how well we did for lunch, money-wise, and I notice something. It said at 12 a customer, just happened to be one of my regulars, called and ordered 10 pizzas for pickup. It said the order was canceled. They had never canceled before, so I was concerned. Quick side note, I feel like I was being more of a manager than both of mine put together. By the way, I was in the back office counting the drawers. Wendy was covering the front. I pick up the phone and call the customer from earlier. I didn't ask why he canceled. I asked how his experience was today since we had a new manager. He said it was fine, except she needed to learn how to work the credit card machine. Apparently she told him she could only take cash. He said he left, went to the ATM and came back and paid $80 in cash for the pizzas. He said other than that, everything was fine. I asked to confirm, and he said he most definitely didn't cancel. So here's one possibility. The credit card machine did go down, and she could only accept cash, so she canceled the order on the computer until he came back and paid, and she just forgot to ring it up again. That would be harmless. Instead, I think she's stealing. I knew if I went to Stan he wouldn't do anything about it, so I call our franchise owner, Eric. I asked his opinion, and he said he thinks I'm right. So he tells me what to do. First, I wasn't allowed to say a word about it to Stan or Wendy. He said let Wendy leave and finish out the day as usual. He said if she's not stealing, you will come up 80 over at the end of the night. If she's stealing, we should break even. I finished counting. We were $1 short. The next day is when the magic happens. I go in at 4 as usual. Wendy is there waiting for Stan to pick her up. Then Eric walks in. He tells her to follow her to the office and tells me to send Stan back when he gets here. Stan comes in and asks why Eric is there. I shrug and tell him he's wanted in the office. Maybe 20 minutes later, Stan walks out, brushes past me and gets in his car. Wendy comes out next and tells me she hopes I'm happy. Eric hadn't come out of the office yet, so I went back there to talk to him. He said in 3 weeks they stole over 1,000 between them, and he would have never known if it wasn't for me. He then says, "Oh, you're the new assistant manager. I'm going to give you $13/hour, and we will consider more after a preliminary period." $13/hour. I was making $8.50 before this. I stayed a few more years after this and left to do the mom thing. I actually miss it sometimes. Wendy and Stan Facebook stalked me for a couple months after. It was pretty hilarious. Story 6. I'm in my late 30s and currently living with my mother, who is in her early 60s. We have always had a single-parent, codependent dynamic ever since my parents' divorce, which happened when I was a young child. My mother is an old-school European immigrant who grew up in a very chaotic and sometimes violent household. She was mostly raised by her strict grandmother. Because of that, she has always practiced what she calls tough love, since that's what she grew up with. I've always admired her ability to stay disciplined and resourceful throughout her life. Despite her ongoing struggle with depression, which has worsened over the years, she has been a lifelong volunteer for several causes and is always there to help others, sometimes to the point of neglecting her own well-being. Her marriage with my father traumatized both of us. He was emotionally and physically abusive, and it took us years to pick up the pieces from all that damage. We both still carry post-traumatic stress disorder as a result. My mother never really had another long-term relationship after my father. There was one man she dated for about 4 years, but after that ended, there was never another father figure in my life. My father left and still remains absent from my life to this day. My mom struggles with high-functioning depression, while I deal with low-functioning depression. We both have health issues, though mine are more serious, which led to her helping me a lot until I learned to manage my symptoms better in my late 20s. She's accompanied me to several emergency visits due to my health condition. That level of care shows how deeply she loves me, but I know those moments must have been emotionally difficult for her as well. However, she is also extremely protective and controlling. She believes I shouldn't make mistakes because, according to her, I can simply use her life as an example. Therefore, if she tells me not to do something and I still go ahead with it, we end up in arguments that can drag on for hours. These fights are emotionally draining. When I try to explain that I need to learn some lessons for myself so they'll truly stick, she insists that it's a waste of time and that I'm being foolish. She often says things like, "Don't come crying to me if you make a mistake that hurts you after I've warned you." In addition to my physical health problems, I also have mental health challenges. After doing some research recently, I've started to realize that I may be on the autism spectrum. During my years of agoraphobia and severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, I couldn't work, but I tried my best to maintain our rented home while she worked. Often, I struggled to complete tasks the way she wanted because I would have panic attacks or emotional meltdowns. She couldn't really empathize with that. Her dismissive attitude toward mental health struggles was incredibly painful for me. Unless my physical health issues flared up, she showed little sympathy for my panic attacks or for the fact that they sometimes prevented me from completing chores. She also showed little understanding when my mental health struggles forced me to cancel school courses or leave jobs I couldn't handle. Fast forward to now, in my late 30s, and we still have the exact same dynamic. I only learned about the concept of boundaries this year, but every time I try to enforce them, it causes an argument. She immediately tells me not to school her because she's the parent. She insists that I have no proof that I can handle life independently and constantly reminds me that, in her opinion, age doesn't determine adulthood, actions do. I'm mainly struggling to gain independence because of my health issues, and honestly, the psychological strain from our constant arguing makes me feel like I'm losing control of myself. Every disagreement drains me emotionally, and it feels like there's no room to breathe or grow. Her most recent focus of criticism has been my choice in romantic partners. 2 years ago, I was in a relationship with a much older man, and she found it absolutely unacceptable. Despite the fact that I'm a grown adult, she said it was inappropriate because, in her eyes, I act and look much younger than I actually am. Therefore, she felt the man I was dating was taking advantage of me. The daily criticism I endured was relentless. She repeatedly told me I had lost my sense of judgment and that what I was doing was disgraceful. She became so upset that she worked herself into a panic and even threatened to disown me. Currently, I'm in a relationship with a man who, like me, is neurodiverse and a bit younger. My mother formed a negative opinion of him early on and said he was strange because of how we interacted together. She once saw him get slightly frustrated and emotionally triggered, nothing dangerous or alarming. But because of her unresolved trauma from my father's abuse, she immediately concluded that this relationship was wrong for me. Her distrust of men has never faded, and she projects that fear onto every person I date. Anytime I bring up my boyfriend, she finds something to criticize. She'll point out that he doesn't spend much money on me, that he lives with one of his parents, or that he might be controlling if we go out too late. The reality is, he had to move back home temporarily after living independently, but she refuses to acknowledge that context. The biggest issue now is that she has explicitly said my boyfriend is not welcome in our home. We both rent this place, it isn't her house alone, but she refuses to have a calm conversation to get to know him or discuss our intentions as a couple. She's already made up her mind about him without even giving him a fair chance. So, is it really unfair for me to tell her that I don't want to hear her opinions or suggestions about my relationship until she's willing to actually meet him and talk? I feel like that's a reasonable request. But every time I try to say that, she becomes defensive, claiming that I don't like to be told anything and that I'm always on edge. The truth is, I've developed so much anxiety that any mention of his name makes me brace myself for another argument. It's emotionally exhausting, and I can feel the toll it's taking on my health. I can't move out right now because of my financial and physical situation, and it feels like I'm trapped in this cycle. I just don't know what to do anymore. I love my mother deeply, but I also know that if something doesn't change soon, her constant criticism and control might completely wear me down. I'm really at the end of my rope and looking for any advice on how to handle this without destroying our already fragile relationship.